Hello, Night Nation. I'm Trace Trelko from the Sons of UCF, joined by Eric Lopez of the Black and Gold Banneret. Welcome to Around the Kingdom. Elo, hello to you.
Hello, Trace. Coming up on the fastest UCF show around, Johnny Dawkins extended. We'll react to that news. Plus, UCF and Florida football under the lights. But does that mean UCF football is under the microscope? We'll discuss that and much more on this edition of Around the Kingdom.
Well, before we get going with all of that, Elo, let us welcome in the third member of our team. He is Adam Eaton from the Sons of UCF. Keeps an eye on the clock, keeps us on our toes. Adam, hello.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me again this week. I'm sorry, I'm down a rabbit hole of UCF golfers, but I promise to pay attention for most of the show today.
All right. Thank you, Adam. We'll check back in a few. Just win, baby. Elo, we've been talking about the Gators game, the most important game, the Super Bowl, as some have said on the UCF schedule. Some say UCF is the Gators Super Bowl. I want to point out resident provocateur on social media and in the message boards in the dungeon, Dolly_drama. He's calling out Gus Malzahn here in June for this game. This night game in the Swamp is an absolute must win, says Dolly, for the Big 12 conference banner and in-state recruiting. ECU, he points out losses now from Gus Malzahn, important games. ECU, Navy, AAC, title game, botch, Baylor, embarrassment. Growing pains, lip service is over. Been talking about this for 3 years. Produce in all caps. Do you think he is an outlier, Elo? Is there a bit of a line in the sand for Gus Malzahn to produce and win this game?
I think there's an outlier in that if they don't win, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. You're going to coach the next game. However, I will agree with this. I think that game sets the tone for the rest of the year, Trace. And this is why you and I are kind of on different sides of this. I do think if UCF loses to Florida in Gainesville, I think a percentage of the fan base, I think a percentage of the audience tunes out. I think they're out. They check out. You know, that's the deal. I think that is a factor in this. You have a lot of optimism early in the year. It's one thing you lose a game to, TCU. It happens on the road. You lose to Florida, everybody's going to hear about it. And I do think from that standpoint, all that bravado and talk and transfer ads and all that doesn't matter if you lose to a team that's 2 hours away from you.
I will say this, and I have already gone on record as believing that the Big 12 games are more important. But if they lose this, I think it puts more pressure on UCF to win Big 12 games, right? And find their way to that Black Friday showdown with Utah. So I think there's more pressure on UCF if they drop this game. But do you think of this as Gus Malzahn's fourth year or second year? I almost feel like Gus Malzahn hit the reset button after his first 2 years, that transitional year last year into the Big 12. And that this is really year 2, not year 4. But I think Dolly and others are saying, hey, you've been here for a while now. This is your team. Produce. Let's see the results. Beat that in-state rival in Florida.
I don't think there's such a thing as just your team because you could flip a roster in 5 minutes. That's the thing with the deal. So I see both sides of that, where you can make the argument that really this is his second year building this team. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean what it used to mean. It used to mean like, we'll buy all this time. At some point, here's what I will say, Trace. Maybe we can meet in the middle ground on this. We've talked so much about the pressures on Florida, the pressures on UCF. This ain't any more of the Florida UCF games that used to be in the past when UCF was the team in the mid-major, if you will, quote unquote, or in the G5 level. No, there's pressure on both sides. You're equal, in my view.
Yeah, I think we can meet in the middle on that. Pressure on both sides.
No doubt. Speaking of pressure, came out on Friday, courtesy of the Orlando Sentinels. Mr. Matt Murschel, shout out to him. And breaking the story that Johnny Dawkins and UCF have reached an extension. 2-year contract extension that will keep Coach Dawkins through 26-27. Trace, your reaction to the Matt Murschel. UCF obviously then came out with it, so it's all official there. But credit to Matt Murschel there for breaking it. But your reaction?
Well, I think those that watch us on this show know where we stand on Johnny Dawkins. It's been long rumored, and finally details come out. Still leaves him is going to be one of, if not the lowest paid coaches in the Big 12, right? So for those that say, the resources aren't a factor, and we'll talk more about the way players are being paid in the Big 12 to play men's basketball, it's overdue. I think this is a contract where Johnny wants to, don't you get the sense at 60 years old, Johnny just wants this to be a final stop for him, a last job. I do think, though, it doesn't quiet the boo birds, those that are on the anti-Dawkins, tangent. What will satisfy them? What will be the expectations now? UCF 7-11 in the first year. Oklahoma and Texas move on. Those former Pac-12 schools move in. The schedule goes to 20 games. Is it 10-10? Is it a bubble team in the NCAA tournament? Got to make the NCAA tournament. Very favorable contract for UCF. Buyout drops significantly after the next season. So pro Terry Mohajir in the buyout, but I think it's overdue, and I don't think it changes the conversation about Johnny Dawkins.
I will say I have an article, depending on when you listen to this and watch this, there will be a column on blackandgoldbanneret.com where I say this was a win for both Coach Dawkins and UCF. The big win, I think, for Coach Dawkins, to me, and I give, again, credit to Matt Murschel. He spoke to Terry Mohajir. I'm going to quote what Terry Mohajir said here, Trace. This past offseason, we've invested about $12.5 million into the basketball arena. We've increased Dawkins' staff and some of his resources and his operating budget deal. He believes that the athletic department should provide more resources for the basketball program to continue on their accomplishments. Basically admitting, yeah, we haven't given this program a chance with resources. He agreed with my column that I wrote 2 years ago, Trace, about the lack of resources and why Johnny Dawkins has done more for UCF than UCF's done for him. I think Terry Mohajir basically admitted that, and he's trying to price. So I think that's why Dawkins wins. I do think Mohajir and UCF wins in that they have a flexible deal with Johnny Dawkins. It's a win-win for all parties. If UCF, let's say, makes the tournament the next year or two, I think Dawkins' value skyrockets. If it doesn't work out, it's not UCF. It's not an anchor around the program. So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
I'll say this, Elo. I think this is also about the next contract, perhaps for the next coach. UCF has to continue to increase its investment in men's basketball. If it doesn't work out with Johnny Dawkins after this coming season or the next, you still need the dollars to attract a bigger name coach that's going to do what a lot of fans want to see with this basketball program being an annually competitive.
And the $2 million will not do it for the next head coach. No. That is tied for last in the Big 12 with Craig Smith of Utah. On that. So Johnny actually done UCF a favor here, which, maybe some people should realize that.
Yeah, when you're talking about this $2 million contract for Johnny Dawkins, how about Coleman Hawkins, a new Kansas State player formerly of Illinois, reported to make $2 million for the coming year. They had no problem doling out money in Manhattan, Kansas. So your player on Kansas State, one player on the roster making as much as the head coach of UCF, and as you just said, Johnny Dawkins, even with this bump, still the lowest paid coach in the league.
Not a surprise. Are we really surprised by this, though, Trace? I mean, this is the new landscape of quote-unquote college athletics. I'm not sure what we're going to call it sooner or later. I mean, I would bet there's more football guys that are making just as much, if not more than that, especially starting quarterbacks. But this is across all sports. As we're doing this, as we're recording this, the National Softball Player of the Year, Najee Kennedy, has been reported will be entering the portal and will probably go to the highest bidder, which I think will be around 6 figures, close to 7 in softball. Trace, that's the landscape. That's the wild, wild west out there.
And she's not leaving a mediocre program.
Stanford.
Right.
Stanford. Like, good Lord, I would. That's in one of the great academic schools. I don't think this is a good, really example of where we're headed with all this. But my concern, Trace, beyond UCF basketball, people can ridicule about the resources enough. Does UCF have enough resources, period, to contend in the wild, wild west with some of these other big gun schools? Maybe in one sport they can, but can they across the board? I'm not sure they can, Trace. I'm worried.
Well, I joked a couple of weeks ago calling it Next Chance U. There are some projects that Johnny has added to this roster where you're not getting a bona fide star for $2 million in this Coleman Hawkins. You have a proven commodity in him and some others with potential that UCF has to bring together and Johnny has to mold as a team. So a lot of projects on this UCF roster, talented on paper, but you know what you're getting, and that's why they're paying $2 million for him.
Well, and here's the thing. Isn't Johnny Dawkins, you're a baseball guy. It sounds like the Tampa Bay Rays. Get some guys, projects, try to get them in a bargain because you can't compete with the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Cubs, your beloved Cubs, who love to spend a lot of money.
Well, the Cubs are not a good example. They spent a lot of money and got nothing to show for it. Next topic.
I just wanted you to hear that.
Just want to get that in.
Well, maybe the Cubs should do what Brett Yormark is thinking about, which is sell the naming rights, Trace, of the Cubs and make some cash. What? Brett Yormark apparently wants to sell the naming rights as the title sponsor for the league, could bring up to $30 to $50 million. In other words, maybe instead of the Big 12, it's the Alliance 12. Trace, your reaction to Brett Yormark's latest idea.
I'm glad we're recording when we are and not when this news came out initially, because I struggle with this, right? I don't like it from a traditionalist standpoint, but I also spent years not really caring for the approach of AAC Commissioner Mike Oresco. And we've praised Brett Yormark for being aggressive, thinking outside the box, trying to position the Big 12. The Big 12 doesn't have the resources of the Big 10 and the SEC. And so he's got to squeeze money where he can. And if this brings in 30 to 50 million annually, you know where the TV contracts are. The Big 12 does not match those other contracts. And if the Big 12 is going to be competitive in that playoff landscape, a chance to win a national championship, these are the sorts of deals he has to make. So I don't think they'll do anything embarrassing, people joking with all sorts of names, including Bucky's, but that can cut both ways on names. Remember Enron Field in Houston, the former home of the Houston Astros, and failed crypto things all over the country attaching themselves to arenas. So I think they'll be smart with a proven brand name, but if it brings in additional cash, you got to give them credit for that.
Well, and here's the thing. For all the, oh my God, how can you sell off the Big 12? How many teams are in the Big 12, Trace?
16.
What are we talking about? Maybe we should.
It's not the most important big either. The Big 10, which has got how many? 18, 16, 18, 20, whatever.
What are we protecting here? What are we really protecting here?
It's not a name that means anything anymore. It's not accurate. It doesn't have the right number of teams in it. And you don't know where the number will change again. Even if you locked it and changed it to Big 16, you don't know what it'll become next.
And I think this is only the tip of the iceberg, Trace. I think this will go beyond. I think you'll see patches, jerseys. We'll have logo, naming rights on jerseys and things. Schools might get involved in this. Don't be surprised, for example, if a coach title will be named after a sponsor. I could see Gus Malzahn no longer the head coach of UCF, but instead the Sons of UCF head coach.
That would be rich. I like that. Let's bring back in Adam in time for some silliness, as if though we haven't spent about 12 minutes doing that already.
I kind of like that idea, Elo. We'll get back to that. All right, gentlemen, here we go. It's college baseball time right now, right? College World Series going on, but obviously UCF not involved. I'm curious. I'm going to start with you, Elo. What is your strategy for watching an event after UCF's been eliminated? Do you root for conference? Do you root for state? Do you root for underdog? What is your strategy after UCF's been eliminated from a competition or a tournament? What's your rooting interest look like?
It's a great question. It kind of varies. Like, I usually root for the teams that UCF play to do well because it makes UCF look better, right? Like, the fact that Florida State ended up going to the World Series in college baseball helps the fact that UCF lost a really good team. There's nothing worse than you get eliminated by a team and then they, faltered. And you're like, how the heck did we lose to that team? So I usually root for that. I am one that'll root for the conference of UCF to do well as well. And then maybe I'll root for teams that I don't like the Florida Gators.
I would say it varies as well. I will tend to root for the conference, but never rooted for South Florida to do well representing the AAC. So I would have rather they lost, the AAC denied some sort of championship than that they win anything. Also, what may be a good storyline, for example, Florida State in baseball, never having won, right? And UCF having played them, that would be an interesting storyline.
Yep.
All right, fair enough. All right, here's your second question, gentlemen. We are recording on Sunday. It is Father's Day today on the Sunday we're recording. So Trace, I'll start with you. Who do you consider the father of UCF football?
The father of UCF football. Gene McDowell, recent Hall of Fame inductee. I think the most substantive progress from its inception to where he handed off the program occurred on his watch.
I have to agree. I don't want to agree with Trace. It's not something I enjoy, but I have to reluctantly agree. It is Gene McDowell. I mean, without him, who knows where UCF football would be, who UCF will be, period. He deserves a ton of credit for what he did building that program at the FCS level. And remember, helped bring Dante Culpepper, who was a difference maker as far as bringing eyeballs to the school.
Can I get a George O'Leary in second place? No, neither of
Maybe?
you.
He's got a statue that's not quite as tall as he is. That's good enough.
Fair
He's
enough.
the
And if you
father
don't-
of Sons of UCF, maybe?
That's fair. Well, speaking of fathers of Sons of UCF, if you'll indulge me, I've got a special guest this week. I've got my son Aiden. He's here, and he wants to ask you all the third question of Silly Game. So, Aiden, get to the microphone. You got Eric, you got Trace. What's your question for them this week?
All right. Who is your favorite all-time UCF football player? Mine is Brandon Marshall.
Elo, all-time favorite UCF football player via Aiden here. Good question, buddy.
Wow. First of all, we just upgraded on the Silly Game host there. That was the best question we've had in the history of Around the Kingdom.
This is
Fair.
true.
I just mentioned him. Dante Culpepper was my favorite UCF. I've got his 8 jersey when I got to the bookstore for the first time. I remember driving up because my buddies were going to UCF at the time to watch him play at the Citrus Bowl at the time against Youngstown State on the Halloween weekend. And I was just in awe of him. I can't say that I've been in awe of any other UCF football player other than Dante Culpepper.
Yeah, got to say Dante Culpepper, and Adam, you know this as we've participated in coverage of the Varsity Knights golf tournament, to actually meet Dante Culpepper in person, the man, the myth, the legend, and interview him and feature him on Sun's programs. That has been a highlight of my time at UCF.
All right, well, I will put this one to bed. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking our questions.
Thank you. All right, Elo, before the silly game, we were talking about the money, the naming rights. The other thing Brett Yormark and the Big 12 are making headlines is this consideration of private equity investment in the league, maybe up to $1 billion for as much as 20% of the conference. I just gave Brett Yormark credit for thinking outside the box. What about this one? That's a risky proposition. You don't know how that plays out over the long term. Perhaps a deal that continues long after Brett Yormark may be commissioner of the Big 12 and the fallout that could come from it if it doesn't go well.
Well, and where is he getting that? Well, who's bringing in that money? Who's going to be that investment? We've seen this, the PGA get some slack trying to merge with Live Golf and all that stuff. Who knows where that's coming from? But look, here's the thing, Trace. Brett Yormark is not a college traditional guy. I don't really personally think Brett Yormark cares about college athletic model before. I think he looks at it as a business guy, and he's like, how do we get as much revenue for our conference and for our respective partners, each school? And to be honest with you, in this defense, Trace, the college model didn't work. It's not working. Like, it's blown up in the bits and pieces. So I kind of understand where he's coming from, trying to find as much revenue to keep up with the SEC and the Big Ten.
He also wants to be the first to do something. He doesn't want to be a follower. And, something you just said I thought was interesting, having had the opportunity to see him at UCF and be in a question and answer with him. I don't think he's the biggest sports guy when it comes to college athletics. I think what we talk about every week, we're naming athletes across the sports of various teams. I don't think he is as invested in that. I think he wants to see it be successful. I think this one is risky on paper. And I want to see what comes out of it. He's already talking to investors overseas. And how does that play out across the landscape of all of the particular colleges? I mean, they are in different states with different rules. And it's still, we're still discussing whether college athletes should be considered employees, right? You're just infusing a great deal more money. But I think that's what he needs to do, is be creative. I just think this one, considering the track record, is risky.
Well, keep in mind, though, he can't do anything without the approval of all the members in the league. It's not like he's going isolation here. Guys, we're going to do this and that's it. So I can't fault him for trying to think of different ideas, a little outside the box. Some of this, though, may be a little bit out of bounds. Who knows? We'll see. I can't blame the guy for trying some different stuff and looking at. You used to be the guy that used to blame Mike Oresco, saying he didn't try anything. Now you're ripping for trying different stuff. What do you want?
5 minutes ago, I gave him credit and mentioned Oresco. So I'm just skeptical of the private equity based on its track record.
When are you going to talk to Brett Yormark, by the way? I keep waiting for that one-on-one.
In the hallway at Tulane Stadium.
Oh, well. Now, earlier in the program, you mentioned Dolly Drama, talking about all the put up or shut up time for UCF football. Well, according to Phil Steele, maybe Phil Steele's telling Dolly to shut up because Phil Steele's not impressed, Trace, with UCF. He picks UCF 9th in the Big 12. Only R.J. Harvey on his second team all Big 12 list, along with wide receiver Kobe Hudson, Lee Hunter, and Malachi Lawrence earning a spot on the first team. But not a lot of love here from your buddy, your old Phil Steele, who you've interviewed in the past. He's not buying into the UCF hype, Trace. Your reaction?
Well, for several weeks now, we've been talking about these preseason projections and these lists, and UCF does not show up favorably in any of them. And I think I go back to Dolly's comment he's saying it in reference to the Gator game, but produce. I think we've seen the highly touted high school recruiting classes from Gus Malzahn and staff, how they have fared in this, transfer portal season. Now show it on the field, right? He's got this quarterback that, fits his offense. He's made changes at the coordinators. Hey, he's back calling plays again for the umpteenth time, right? Produce. And I think that the national media is still skeptical that when it comes down to the games that a UCF would beat a Utah at home on a Black Friday or will fare more successfully on the road, not to mention the Gator game, right? UCF established in an early line as a 6-point underdog, which didn't come as a surprise to me.
But here's the question, Trace. What is fair then? Because the national media is telling us, whoa, don't expect too much. You're still ways away from the Big 12, and yet it seems like, are we working? I'm going to use a wrestling term here. Are we working ourselves into a work? In other words, are we going to get ourselves psyched up when really we shouldn't? Is this team really that good? Are you sold on this defense? Why should I be sold on this defense? Why should I believe this defense is going to stop teams all of a sudden? Because they picked a bunch of guys from other teams? I'm not sold either on the defensive there. I think it does get a little overboard. I do think our fan base, we all get worked up on this, and I'll give you credit for this. You don't fall for it. You're one of the few that doesn't. You get a lot of flack for it, but you're hitting a high batting average when it comes to the UCF record predictions the last few years.
Well, we're going to speed up now through the last couple of topics, Elo. Grading the teams from their first season in the Big 12 and, in the case of men's soccer, the Sun Belt. We talked about men's and women's soccer last week. Let's talk about football. Knights finished 6-6. You'll hear a UCF mic say, yeah, but only one win against a traditional Big 12 team in Oklahoma State, and given the Cincinnati and the Houston games and the Cincinnati game, and went down to the wire to get that win on the road. What's your final grade? They didn't look good. They had everybody playing in that Gasparilla Bowl, right, and lose to Georgia Tech. What's your final grade for the Knights in their first year in the Big 12 for football?
D. I almost flunked them, but they made a bowl, and they beat Oklahoma State. But they went under 500 for the season, Trace. And I will say this.
First time a Gus Malzahn coach team finished under 500.
I think it's not unreasonable to expect a winning season every year from UCF football. Am I wrong on that, Trace? I know, that was my critique. One of my critiques of O'Leary was, how can you be so inconsistent with all that you have around you, where one year you'll go to the Liberty Bowl and then next year you go 4-8. To me, you should have a winning football team every year. And the fact that they didn't, I understand the switch to the Big 12, but there was games there they should have won that could have easily turned a 6-7 year to an 5 year, 9-4. So D is my grade.
I'm going to go C- because I do think they get credit for the transition to the Big 12 and being 6-6 for the most part protected the home turf. I mean, there was the outlier game with Baylor, and there were some games that probably
they should have won the Baylor game. They had it.
I know.
How do you defend that?
I'm not defending it. I'm just saying C-. First year in the Big 12, 6-6, the best of the teams that made that transition.
Are you listening to this, UCF, Mike?
Cincinnati.
I hope you're listening. I mean, he's probably worried about the Panthers more like I am still. He's not going to like your grade. Anyway.
All my grades have been higher than yours. All right. How about volleyball, Elo?
Volleyball. Trace, year one, finished middle of the pack, Big 12 in year one of Jenny Maurer. What grade are you giving UCF volleyball?
Oh, you're hitting me right off the top with the grade. I was one that said when they jumped out to the good start, hey, wait a second. There are a lot of good volleyball teams in the Big 12, and they have a murderer's row down the stretch, and they faced a gauntlet, and they did not fare well, right? They ended the season on a big losing streak, and they got swept in a lot of those matches. Having to replace McKenna Melville big, changing head coach after many years to Jenny Maurer. C-, Elo, C-. I'm going to keep it about the same as football.
I have it as a C. Is C better than a C-? I don't know. You're the professor.
C is better than a C-.
Yeah, I'm going to go C. Look, I think Jenny Maurer took a tough situation. Literally had to take over the program, in May when Todd Lake left for this pro league. I mean, he talked to you about it on the show and everything. Had to replace McKenna Melville, which you don't replace in 1 year. I think they had him competitive. I understand the ending was not very good, but I think middle of the pack, Big 12 in year 1 is not a bad start. Now she has her full staff here in year 2. So, but I think I thought they did okay. I think people got psyched up when they got off to the great start, like you pointed out, and didn't realize, the backloaded deal. So I think she did a very good job under the circumstances. I go C.
Wow, that's the first one you've graded better than me, I think. So,
was that due to happen at some point?
All right, time to bring back in Adam. Time for some facts, some knowledge. What did we get right? What did we get wrong, Adam?
All right, here we go. We're talking about Florida and UCF, rather. Chris Vanini of The Athletic says this is a major trap game for the University of Florida. So Vanini is watching this game and thinks, Florida could fall into a trap here. Guys talked about Johnny Dawkins, 148 and 103 in his career, 99 wins shy of Kirk Spearaw for second all-time at UCF behind, of course, Torchy Clark.
99
Coleman,
wins.
99 wins.
That's going to be tough for him to get to.
That's a while. You do the math, Trace. You guys talked about Coleman Hawkins. Fun fact, he's a career 7.8 point a game scorer and a career 4.6 rebounds per game. He did average
That's a $2 million player
last year. That is worth $12 million. The naming rights of the Big 12, Allstate is, I guess, the leader in the clubhouse. I'm not really sure why. Private equity, I'll leave you with this. What has private equity touched that's actually turned better? You talked about Gus Malzahn in football. The first losing season since 2016 for the Knights this year, Elo. So to your point, we should no longer have losing seasons. I'm on board with you.
And Gus has never had a losing season, right, Adam?
No, it's first of his career, which is why he made the changes that he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why he earned the, what was it? A D? D minus? What was it?
D minus and C, I thought I heard from you too.
Yeah, you gave him a nice grade there. You passing grade.
All right. Thank you, Adam. All right. One more thing, Elo, before we go. As we're counting down the days until UCF hosts New Hampshire, August 29th, a Thursday, it's actually football, not the first sport that gets going in the 2024-2025 athletic year for UCF. The women's soccer team hosts Miami in an exhibition August 10th before traveling to Florida Atlantic for the regular season opener on August 15th, which means, Elo, as we record and as this is released, less than 2 months until we see actual teams playing meaningful games and we can get through the silly season of speculation. We can actually chew on some actual results.
The silly season or the silly game of the offseason? Which one is it?
The silly game. But we're less than 2 months away, and we will still have plenty to talk about all summer long. Look for...
You rang?
Yes.
Silly game, you rang?
Look for new episodes midweek every week on the Sons of UCF YouTube channel. Also, you'll find Around the Kingdom on the Sons audio feed, wherever you get your downloadable content and podcasts. I want to thank Adam Eaton and his son, Aiden, for participating in this week's show. For Eric Lopez, I'm Trace Trelko. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this week's Around the Kingdom.